WATE 6. This is Tennessee This Week.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Lori Tucker. On Monday, Governor Lee delivered his 8th and final State of the State address. The governor outlined his administration's priorities for the year ahead and a proposed $58 billion budget, which includes $425 million for infrastructure improvements, $230 million for TennCare to help address increasing costs, and $155 million to double the number of the state's school voucher scholarships. Victor Ashe, someone who has held titles ranging, of course, from Knoxville mayor to U.S. ambassador to Poland, joins us now. We'll ask for his insight on the governor's speech, as well as several other big topics in the headlines. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Lori. It's good to be here, and interesting watching the governor's message, because the issue of extending Medicare, which has been an issue going back to Bill Haslam, again was not addressed. And there's several 100,000 Tennesseans who are not getting the hospital and health care coverage that they are in other states.
Give us more specifics.
That's a very serious omission.
Yes, give us more specifics on numbers and what he should have included in that.
Well, just to include anyone would be a plus. I mean, you shouldn't let any Tennessean who otherwise could have health coverage, hospital coverage, go without. What is the rationale for that?
You know, he also talked about rural health care. So let's take a listen to what he had to say on that.
Rural Tennessee's growing. Our communities need more options. But right now, if a doctor wants to open a new clinic in a rural county, or if your hospital wants to build an imaging center closer to the families that need it, existing certificate of need laws make that nearly impossible.
Your thoughts on what he is saying?
Well, certainly,
about that?
I mean, rural areas, I'm not sure what his definition of rural area is. Is it Hancock County with a population of 5,000, which is less than Fountain City, or Trousdale County or some of the smaller counties, or is it a more medium-sized county such as Monroe County or McMinn County? But certainly, these are issues. Part of it is based upon where is the county, what is the population, what are the, as a practical matter, you're not putting in a new hospital in a community of 4,500 people. You might put in an infirmary or a clinic, but even that wouldn't necessarily have a great deal of use. So it's really where are you going to deal with this, and what kind of service are you extending? And at the same time, you're doing vouchers to people who apparently can afford to pay for their children to go to a private school, but now are going to have taxpayers subsidizing them. Which is more important, middle to wealthy income families get a $7,300 voucher, or someone who has no health coverage and faces serious medical issues?
This is a huge concern, a lot of people. And we just did a story this past week, on Sweetwater, the Sweetwater Health System, potentially losing its labor and delivery department, with nurses walking off on the job because they just can't afford to keep it open, some say. What does that say to you about where things stand?
It says to me they need to re-examine their proposals to the legislature. The legislature needs to stand up and say, we need a new look at this. And how do you explain why vouchers are more significant as opposed to someone who faces major health issues and may have to be hospitalized?
I want to ask you more about the school voucher program. A lot of people who don't like it have said, why does it make sense at all? Who is the governor trying to please with this program?
I don't know who he's trying to please. I think he believes philosophically that everyone should have a chance to send their children wherever they want to send them. But again, is the money there to do that? And is it going to a need? If it's a student who's in an area that doesn't have the best schools and would like to go to a school where their son or daughter could do better and get a better education, that's a different issue than someone who doesn't have health care.
Well, we're trying to find out where these vouchers are going, and it's hard to find out.
Well,
we're
it's
not
hard to
getting a
find
lot of
out
that
in part
information.
because the legislature and the governor apparently don't value transparency to the point where a television station such as this could have access. Frankly, any Tennessean should have access under the open records law.
All right. Moving on here, we've talked about health care. We have talked about vouchers. We have a lot of other things we want to talk about. In your view, are there any areas in the governor's budget you think are lacking other than what you've talked about? What else?
Well, those are
should
the
he have
obvious
brought up?
ones that stand out, and hopefully the legislature will do its job. One problem with having a legislature that is overwhelmingly in one party, and the minority party doesn't even have a third, is it makes it difficult to have alternative points of view heard. And we see the same thing in Washington, although the margins there are much more narrow. And given the upcoming election, the makeup of the Congress could very well change based upon the trends underway, the Texas special election and others.
Given what you just said about the makeup of our legislature, what are the odds that this budget, pretty much in its current form, will pass?
Well, I don't think there's any question that 95% of the governor's budget will pass as presented, and there'll be some adjustments made. Whether there'll be significant adjustments or just moving one item to another item remains to be seen. But I don't foresee any. I don't know who it is on the Republican side who will stand up and say, we need to take another look at this. And many of the people who were anti-voucher 4 years ago are now pro-voucher.
How do you make sense of that?
I don't think you make sense of it. It's just there, and it's not a sensible thing. I mean, when Bill Haslam was governor, he tried to extend health care to people who didn't have it, and that's to his credit. Unfortunately, he didn't have the votes to do it. But he certainly took the right stand.
All right, very different than what's happening right now, according to you. Let's talk about other stories in the headlines, beginning with Michigan. What do you think about that ongoing situation there? 2 people lost their lives. What do you think of the Trump administration's efforts now to de-escalate it by removing hundreds of troops?
Well, there are 2 deaths late in terms of what's going on in Minnesota. And, but at least they seem to be making an effort. We'll see. You know, I just find it very difficult to understand why they set quotas of, well, we're going to pick up 3,000 people or 4,000 people without any look at, are they legally qualified to be here? Are they not qualified? What are the consequences? Farmers who need workers are not going to have the workers. People, whether it's a small business or whatever. And it really, in my mind, makes no sense what we're doing. And then you have the tragedy of 2 people who literally were killed, and one, the coroner has now said it was a homicide.
Yeah, pretty quickly they ruled
very
that.
quickly, and if it is, who gets indicted, and what are the consequences? What does the jury decide? And
when will we see that? When will it get to that point?
We don't know, but certainly if it was a homicide, someone should be indicted, whoever committed the homicide.
My apologies, I mentioned Michigan, it's obviously Minneapolis, but one new item is that the remaining troops there are going to have body cameras. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
I think it's essential not only to have body cameras, but also have audio. When I was mayor, we established police officers because we had a number of racial instances where people would make allegations and it was someone's word against another. But when you have an audio and you have a video, then if someone did something they shouldn't have done, it's there. They either did it or they didn't do it.
You've got it right there in front of you. It's
now
incontrovertible.
it was expensive. The city taxpayers paid over $1 million to equip, in those days, some 400 city police officers. But on the other hand, it brought transparency and truthfulness to the situation. And for the vast majority of police officers who are good men and women, it validated what they did, as opposed to allegations that they did something they didn't do.
In your view, money well spent?
Money well spent and necessary, particularly in a case where there are racial issues and people sometimes get blinded to what they ought to be saying.
You know, with your vast experience with foreign policy, I'd like to get your input on the Russia-Ukraine war. What do you make of the ongoing peace talks? Do you think they could actually lead somewhere at this point?
Well, it's hard to believe that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump have the public good at heart. First of all, Vladimir Putin started this war. He's a modern day Hitler, in my opinion. He just doesn't kill as many people. But over 400,000 Russians have died. Several hundred thousand Ukrainians have died. And I don't know that we're any closer to a solution or not. But one can only hope that's the case. But, you know, you look at situation, I mean, with what's going on in Venezuela, what's going on, Trump making allegations that we would perhaps militarily invade Greenland, then withdrawing it. But does he come back to it again? And it's so unnecessary. We have a treaty with Denmark and Greenland where we could put in 10 new military bases next week if we had the money and wanted to do it. You don't need to acquire it.
Yeah. I want to talk more about Greenland and more of your thoughts on the renewed threats to take it after the U.S. took military action, as we kind of touched on in Venezuela. What do you think should happen there?
You're talking about Venezuela?
Yeah.
Well, I think there should be
And
a
Greenland.
freely elected. There's not a free election. Maduro was removed. He's now in jail in New York State. But the people who replaced him are his handpicked hench people. And I don't know that anything's much better. We'll see. I mean, people that are freely elected should be the ones running the country if you truly believe in democracy. In Greenland, we have democracy. The citizens of Greenland, all 57,000 of them, don't want to be part of the United States. So why are we even talking about it when we already, one, have a military base there and could have more if we thought it was essential? And then furthermore, how much is American taxpayers going to pay to put in 3 or 4 or 5 more military bases and send troops to Greenland? For what purpose? I mean, it's not as if they're being invaded by Russia or China. They've got more serious issues. And of course, talking about taking over Greenland is a green light to China to take over Taiwan.
Explain more.
In the sense they're similar. I mean,
Yeah.
Taiwan obviously has millions more people.
Right.
But in terms of the concept of one's near one place and one's near another, and it's been discussed for a long time, actually more in Taiwan than in Greenland. Don't think President Xi is not aware of this, and he would do it if he could.
All right. Before we let you go, could you sum it up with what you feel is the most important thing that concerns you right now? Do you have a top issue that really makes you lose sleep at night?
I think the top issue is what's going on in our country today and people losing confidence. And our president making statements about nationalizing elections and, you know, running for a third term that he's not entitled to do, or nationalizing elections of which the federal government has no business
And it's unconstitutional.
doing, and doing raiding the Fulton County Election Commission in Atlanta for an election held five years ago. I mean, you just wonder what on earth is going on. And you have a president who feels there are no guardrails. He can do everything from putting up a monument to tearing down establishing a ballroom at the White House, and money is not a cost.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate it. Always good to see you. And don't go anywhere, everyone. We are going to bring in our panel of pundits coming up. We're back in 90 seconds. And welcome back to Tennessee This Week. Glad you're with us. You know, a moment ago, we heard from Victor Ashe on a wide range of topics. Now let's bring in our panel of pundits to further the conversation. Joining us today, Michael Covington, and we have Greg Isaacson for Courtney Piper. Thanks for being here, and it's always good to see you.
Good to see you, Laura.
Let's go ahead and jump right into the State of the State address, the governor's final one of his office. What are your thoughts on his budget proposal? And since you're our guest, we'll start with you.
You know, it was consistent with Lee's mantra during his administration, and that is vouchers and education. And it was interesting, you know, when we're in the middle of a healthcare crisis, one of the most significant things was doubling the amount of vouchers from 7,000 to 14,000. Also increasing that funding by $155 million. So, you know, and it's interesting because during the voucher debate, a lot of people thought that resources were going to be taken away from public education. And it looks like in this budget, there's kind of a symbiotic relationship because the numbers with the addition of the vouchers are almost equal in terms of public school, private school vouchers. The other thing that stood out to me, Governor Lee likes his state troopers. You know, it's often debated in doing what I do, what is the purpose of troopers? They're kind of like the governor's police force. They watch the mansion, do a lot of transportation, a lot of security, but Lee has made them a big part of this budget. And interesting, consistent with the Trump mandate in Memphis for increased law enforcement, Governor Lee has authorized 100 troopers to be in Memphis full-time. Now think about this, at the cost of $80 million. Now, I don't know if you do the math, that's a lot of money for 100 troopers to go to Shelby County.
Well, especially when you talk about that, you talk about vouchers, and then as Victor Ashe pointed out, where's the health care help?
I am amazed that the governor comes up with whatever monies that he needs. He is a consummate political professional in that regard, and I have always admired how he came to Knoxville and went to Market Square and did a speech. No one really knew who he was, and when he left, he was on his way to the governor's mansion. He has, throughout his tenure, he has continued to push for things that he really wants, and the vouchers were something that he really wanted. It almost seems like a bottomless pit, like there's no limit to the amount of money that's available. But somehow more money gets allocated to it. And I hope the voucher program works well, I really do. But I think the governor has run the governor's office pretty well. I think that he has done the kinds of things that will set Tennessee on a very good trajectory for the future. I'm curious as to what the new governor will do with how Governor Lee leaves the state.
And we will talk about that in just a moment and who that might be, likely will be, maybe. So we'll get to that in a moment. But I'd like to talk more about vouchers because we still have critics saying the amount of the voucher is not enough per family if they're low income to send a child to private school. There's a lot of other monies that need to be spent. Most private schools charge way more than that $7,000. So does it make sense to you? Are already wealthy families getting a little bit of help?
They are.
We don't know. We don't know.
They are, absolutely. But I marvel at the number of parents who are staunch advocates of public schools, yet they send their children to private schools. And the public schools are there for anyone that is in this country. I think that a part of the migration is that parents are trying to get their children out of that environment where it's anything and anybody goes here. I'm not necessarily advocating for private schools. I'm just saying that parents are moving children out of public schools for a reason.
Well, it's interesting, and one of the things that also jumped out about this budget, and Michael talking about, you know, Governor Lee's ability to have an almost seemingly endless supply of money. Tennessee has the greatest surplus it's ever had, $2.2 billion, and yet we are in the midst and throes of a healthcare crisis, a hospital crisis. So, you know, it seems like the legacy is education, but with the money and the resources for a rainy day, I would say, Governor, wake up, it's raining. And we need to help these people that have cancer, have horrific illnesses and can't get the help. But back to vouchers. Is voucher a subsidy for the upper middle class and the wealthy? Or is it a way to facilitate going to a faith-based school, a private school? I think it's an anomaly. And it's when I was on the Higher Education Commission and we were talking about the Hope Scholarship, you know, it was almost like you were giving parents a bonus extra disposable income because the people that can afford to go to public schools are going to go to public schools. Tuition for a public school greatly exceeds $7,000.
Or a private school.
A private school, excuse me. So if you are one of the 14,000 that apply for the vouchers, $7,000 isn't going to pay the tuition for one child, much less families that have multiple children. So, it remains to me to be seen whether it facilitates choice and better education, or whether it's just a subsidy or credit for people that had the money to begin with.
All right, well, stop it there.
Okay.
We'll take a break. I want to hear what you think about this in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. Let's go ahead and bring our panel of pundits. We're down to 2 today, back in to talk about what could happen if Senator Marsha Blackburn wins the race for Tennessee governor. So, Greg, who's most likely, in your view, to get her Senate seat?
There are a number of polls being shot across the state, and Lori, the 800-pound gorilla that's emerging, is none other than our local Congressman Tim Burchett. So, that's an interesting dynamic. I've spoken with the congressman. He is making no bones about the fact that he would be interested in the Senate seat.
He said back in August, hey, if she gets governor, I would be very interested in running. Right. But could he be appointed, or would he have to run? How would that work?
There's a fascinating scenario. If Senator Blackburn resigns, under the 17th Amendment, it falls to state law on how you do the appointment. Under Tennessee law, the governor makes the appointment. Well, Marsha Blackburn is resigning to run for governor. So in theory, you're going to have probably a window where she resigns, if she wins, from the U.S. Senate. She takes the oath of governor of the state of Tennessee, then makes the appointment for Burchett.
Behind the scenes, we talked to Victor Ashe about this, and he said, you're talking about maybe 3 minutes where she could sign away.
Right. So the irony of that, I think it's a fascinating political story that the person that's in the Senate, runs for governor, wins, then appoints her successor after she assumes another vacancy. But how certain lawyers are. I can see the lawsuit right now because you really weren't able to you didn't have the power as the executive because you were a senator, and that nanosecond in between the proclamations impacted it. But I think it's going to be very exciting, but really interesting how these early polls have placed Congressman Burchett ahead of the pack.
What do you think, Michael?
There is a heavier beast in the room. He was formerly known as the Undertaker's little brother, Glenn Jacobs. Glenn Jacobs still wants that Senate seat. And if they have to have a WrestleMania where it's Tim Burchett and Glenn Jacobs for the Senate seat,
that brings up a mental image.
I'm gonna be one of the first in line to buy a ticket for that.
I can't unsee that. But
well, it's an interesting thing to consider. Politics are going to be really, really interesting in the next several months as this decision unfolds. We still have not heard back from the mayor as far as what his consideration is in terms of this seat, but it should be an interesting decision. And today was the first time that I'd heard some individuals think that maybe Marsha Blackburn won't be a shoo-in to win the governor's seat.
I have not heard that.
I've heard that twice today.
I mean, I know it's never a done deal, but she is so far ahead in the polls.
But when you think about it,
John Rose.
Yes.
Congressman Burchett has done a prolific job wearing the Carhartt jacket, and I can't turn on cable news without seeing him make a quip and saying dadgummit or whatever. And then you also have juxtaposed another excellent candidate, a friend of mine, Glenn Jacobs, who can't have more name recognition or more celebrity. But Michael, I think what's important, if you see those two people facing off in an election, I don't think that a Glenn Jacobs has to raise the amount of money a Tim Burchett does, just because I think Glenn's probably got $10 million worth of name recognition and celebrity, whereas he doesn't have to buy that factor.
Well, since we're playing chess here really quickly, we're almost out of time. Would Glenn Jacobs be able to run for Burchett's seat?
I was thinking that as Greg was talking, I was thinking about that very thing. If that's something that could be brokered behind the scenes, that could be really interesting.
All right, we're out of time. Thank you for being here, both
Great.
of you.
Thank you.
And thank you for
Thank you.
joining us. Have a good rest of your Sunday.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6, On Your Side, or Nexstar Media Group Incorporated.